The night of February 17, 2025. A fire broke out at 2 Blake Street in the quiet town plot neighborhood of Waterbury, Connecticut. When firefighters arrived, the homeowner, Kimberly Sullivan, was standing outside, telling 911 that the TV in her son's room had caught fire and he was unconscious inside. But when firefighters rushed into the smoke-filled room, they discovered a scene that would haunt them for life. Police Chief Fernando Spagnolo, with 33 years in law enforcement, would later call it the worst treatment of a human being I have ever witnessed. In the flames, they found an unbelievably emaciated being. At first, they thought it was a child, but it wasn't a child. It was a grown man. He was 32 years old. Standing nearly 5 feet 9 inches tall, he weighed only 68 pounds, less than 31 kilograms. His BMI was just 11, a level of malnutrition so severe it was life-threatening. His skin was gray, bones protruding clearly beneath thin skin. Hair matted, teeth rotted, and he had barely been bathed or received medical care in years. When loaded into the ambulance, this man told the rescue team something that stunned everyone. "I want to be free." He confessed that he had deliberately set the room on fire using hand sanitizer gel, paper, and a lighter. Not because he wanted to die, but because after more than 20 years of captivity in this very house, fire was the only escape he could think of. This is the story of John, a pseudonym to protect his identity, who lived in hell, right in the middle of a bustling neighborhood, where neighbors commuted to work, children played in the streets, and life went on normally. But right behind the walls of the house at 2 Blake Street, a horrific crime was unfolding every day, every hour, every minute. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Horror Mystery Channel. Let's get started. The story begins in the 1990s. Craig Sullivan purchased the house on Blake Street in 1996. 2 years later, he added his new wife's name, Kimberly Sullivan, to the ownership papers. Also living in that house was a boy, Craig's son from a previous marriage. That boy was John. Those who knew John from elementary school remember that he always came to school hungry, dirty, and desperate. Classmates contacted child welfare agencies many decades ago to express concerns about his safety. Tom Pannone, former principal of Barnard Elementary School in Waterbury, where John attended, recalled that he always knew something was wrong. Teachers even brought food to school for this student after noticing him stealing food and eating from trash cans, saying he was constantly hungry. The boy didn't just beg food from friends. He ate food from trash cans. He drank water from urinals. This prompted the school to contact police and Connecticut's Department of Children and Families, DCF, multiple times. Connecticut child welfare workers investigated 6 reports of neglect involving the captive boy over a 9-year period, but said at the time there was not sufficient evidence to substantiate the allegations or remove the child from the home. These investigations occurred from 1996 to 2005, when the victim was between 3 and 12 years old. April 1st, 2005 was a critical milestone in this tragic story. A police report shows an officer was dispatched to the residence at 2 Blake Street at 5:10 p.m. The officer wrote that old schoolmates had called DCF and reported that something must have happened to the boy because he had been absent from school for so long, and they feared that he may have died. John's school friends were so worried they thought he had died. They hadn't seen him for a long time and decided to report to DCF. Police came to the house. They spoke with Kimberly Sullivan. They spoke with John. After visiting the home, the Waterbury officer wrote in his report that he spoke with the boy and he appeared to be in good spirits and health. That was the last time anyone saw John. Right after that DCF and police visit, the Sullivan family withdrew John from school, claiming they would homeschool him. After that, for 20 years, John disappeared from the outside world. Blake Street is a quiet street in Waterbury's town plot neighborhood. Solar panels rest on rooftops, and bird baths stand at the edge of meticulously trimmed lawns. This is an American dream neighborhood, where immigrant families from Italy, Ecuador, and Albania come to build new lives. But at the house at 2 Blake Street, the American dream had turned into a nightmare. Marvin McCullough lived directly across from the Sullivan house for 7 years. When asked about a son, McCullough said, "I was like, who is that? I would see her and her daughters and their boyfriends, but I had no idea there was another person in the house." Zephyr Guarnera, the neighbor living right next door, also never knew John existed. "When I was asked about a son, I was shocked. I never heard or knew that there was a son." The Sullivan family lived reclusively. McCullough said the family only interacted with hello and goodbye greetings, and that was it. Craig Sullivan's brother, Kimberly's husband, said he hadn't seen the victim since 2004 or 2005. In the early years, he recalled celebrating Christmas Eve with the family, but those visits suddenly stopped. When Craig's brother tried to ask about John, attempts to ask questions were reportedly cut off by Kimberly Sullivan, according to the arrest warrant. Eventually, they stopped receiving responses when trying to make contact. For 20 years, no one knew where John was. No friends, no relatives, no neighbors knew of his existence. Only Kimberly Sullivan and her husband Craig knew that behind the closed door on the 2nd floor, a human being was living in conditions worse than prison. The room where John lived for 20 years measured only 8 feet by 9 feet, about 2.4 by 2.7 meters. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a small storage room on the 2nd floor. No heat, no air conditioning. Just a slide bolt on the outside of the door, reinforced with plywood, to ensure John couldn't escape. Police Chief Spagnolo said, "It's worse than the conditions of a jail cell," when describing the room where Kimberly Sullivan kept her husband's son in the house on Blake Street. John's days followed a brutal schedule. 23 hours locked up, only released for about 1 hour in the morning to do housework. 2 sandwiches and 2 small bottles of water per day. That was all. John said he was hungry all day, every day, my whole life. No bathroom. John had to create his own waste disposal system using plastic bottles, straws, and newspaper. He urinated into bottles and poured it through a small hole in the window. He defecated on newspaper, wrapped it up, and took it to the trash during his morning release hour. No bathing. Before the fire, John hadn't bathed in 1 to 2 years. He tried to maintain hygiene by using a little of the drinking water he managed to save, though he had no soap. No haircuts. John said Kimberly Sullivan would cut his hair, but he hadn't had a haircut in 3 years. No dental care. John said he had never been to a dentist. When eating, pieces of his teeth would break off. A typical day for this man involved counting cars outside his window, according to the arrest warrant. That was the only way he could measure time. He counted the cars that passed by. He listened to the radio, the only lifeline to the outside world. He watched the leaves in nearby Chase Park to know what season was coming. When John once tried to sneak out of his room to get food, Kimberly discovered and slapped him in the face. After that, he didn't dare try again. This man lived in constant fear. Fear of being locked up longer. Fear of being fed less. Fear of more cruel punishment. When asked why he didn't tell anyone, the man said he wanted to, but was afraid of being locked up longer and having his food reduced further. Craig Sullivan, John's father, died in January 2024. And according to John, that's when everything got worse. Previously, perhaps the father was still some fragile shield between John and Kimberly. But when Craig passed away, John was completely alone with his stepmother. His condition deteriorated rapidly. He hadn't bathed in over a year. His hair hadn't been cut in 3 years. Food may have been even less than before. The victim's father, who had lived in the house with the victim and Sullivan, died in January 2024. Court records show the Sullivan family experienced serious financial difficulties. Both spouses filed separate Chapter 7 bankruptcy petitions within a 5-year period, citing insurmountable debt from credit card obligations with major banks, including Capital One, Chase, Citibank, and Sears. Financial stress, isolation, and Craig's death may have created an even more toxic environment for John. In February 2025, after nearly 11 months of living alone with Kimberly Sullivan, John made a desperate decision. He would set his room on fire. He thought that either he would be freed or he would die. But he couldn't continue living like this anymore. The night of February 17, 2025, John executed his plan. He used hand sanitizer gel, one of the few personal items he had. He took printer paper from an old printer in the room, and he had a lighter. He set fire near the door, hoping the flames would attract attention and someone would come rescue him. When the flames erupted, Kimberly Sullivan called 911 at approximately 8:42 p.m.
Oh my God. 2 Blake Street.
What's the address?
Please hurry. It's 2 Blake Street. There's a fire.
Okay.
Oh my God. There's a fire. I'm trying.
Ma'am, what's
2
on
Blake
fire?
Street. The TV, I don't know. My son, he was a stepson. He's in his room, and I don't know. He did something with the TV. I was sleeping. I fell asleep.
See flames or smoke?
Yeah, please. We need an ambulance.
Ma'am, all right, you said something's on fire and now you need an ambulance. What's going on there?
Yes, his room. The TV in his room.
Did he get injured? Is he on fire?
Yes, he's injured. Please send the ambulance.
Where is he injured?
I don't know. He's kind of. I don't know. I don't know. He's kind of passed out. He's out of it. Please.
Is the fire out, ma'am?
No, it's not. Please. I'm trying to.
I understand, ma'am. I'm trying to get information on what's going on there.
Oh my God! It's like all the power in the house is out. I don't know if it's blew a fuse.
Okay, ma'am. Just get out of the house, okay?
Yes, I'm gonna call my daughter.
All right.
Oh my God.
She told the dispatcher that the TV in her son's room was on fire and he was unconscious.
I have 2 cats.
Everybody's out,
Yes.
but your stepson's still inside.
Yeah, he's right here.
Okay,
Yes.
come out. Come down the road. Come on.
Firefighters arrived quickly. They rushed into the smoke-filled house and they found John. The scene they witnessed, they would never forget. A man standing 5 feet 9 inches, about 1.75 meters tall, but weighing only 68 pounds, 31 kilograms. Gray skin, protruding bones, matted hair, rotted teeth, filthy and barely alive. Spagnola noted that the night of the February 17 fire rescue was a chaotic scene. Right then and there is when this case started to unfold, with statements from the victim to the first responding officers. Police Chief Spagnola later said, "I credit those officers immensely for not dismissing what the victim was saying at that time." When loaded into the ambulance, John told medical personnel, "I deliberately set the fire. I want to be free." He began telling his story about 20 years of captivity, about the tiny room, about the trickle of meals, about the absolute isolation, about the final desperation that led him to decide to set the room on fire to escape. John was taken to St. Mary's Hospital, then transferred to another facility for treatment. Doctors assessed him as being in severe malnutrition, with a BMI of only 11. They had to be very careful feeding him to avoid refeeding syndrome, a dangerous condition that can be fatal if nutrition is restored too quickly to someone who has been starved long-term. Meanwhile, police began investigating, and what they discovered inside the house at 2 Blake Street shocked the entire nation. When Waterbury police entered the house on Blake Street to investigate, they discovered evidence of a horrific crime that had lasted 2 decades. The room on the 2nd floor, where John was held captive, measured only about 8 by 9 feet. The room door was fitted with a slide bolt on the outside, reinforced with thick plywood. There was no way John could open the door from inside. Police took dozens of photos inside the house. The photos showed the extent of fire and smoke damage, as well as doors and door frames fitted with various types of locks. Police Chief Fernando Spagnolo, with 33 years of experience in law enforcement, described this as one of the worst cases he'd ever seen. Spagnolo said, "In my 33 years in law enforcement, this is the worst treatment of a human being I have ever witnessed. To be honest, when we first started talking about it, we really couldn't believe it." When John recovered enough to answer questions, he told police his entire story. He remembered being mistreated for the first time when he was 3 years old. But the serious captivity began when he was about 11 to 12 years old, right after being withdrawn from school. From then until the day of the fire, John was locked in that small room for almost 23 hours every day, only let out for about 1 hour in the morning to do housework, sweeping, wiping, cleaning, then put back in the room and locked up again. There's one big question everyone wonders. How could this happen for 20 years without anyone knowing? The story of the child protection system's failure is a painful and complex part of this case. As mentioned, DCF investigated 6 reports of neglect over a 9-year period, from 1996 to 2005, when John was between 3 and 12 years old. But they said there wasn't enough evidence to substantiate the allegations or remove the child from the home. In 2005, after John's classmates called DCF fearing he had died from being missing so long, police visited the home. Spagnolo said, "The home was clean. They talked to the victim at that time, and there was no reason for concern or any conditions that existed that would lead the officers to believe that there was anything other than a normal childhood and normal family existence occurring." John later told police that Kimberly Sullivan had coached him to tell DCF that everything was fine. He was scared and had to follow her instructions. After that visit, the Sullivan family withdrew John from school on the grounds of homeschooling. And from then on, no one followed up or checked on John. The state of Connecticut currently has no regulations on homeschooling, only guidance stating that parents should register with the State Department of Education each year they intend to homeschool. But this is only guidance, not mandatory regulation. No one tracks children who are withdrawn from school. This case has raised major questions about the child protection system in Connecticut and across America. Many ask, what would have happened if there were laws requiring periodic checks for homeschooling families? What would have happened if someone went back to check on John after 2005? The Connecticut Department of Children and Families, DCF, issued a statement acknowledging they had investigated 6 reports of neglect from 1996 to 2005, but didn't find sufficient evidence. They also said they would fully cooperate with the ongoing criminal investigation. But for John, this answer is perhaps too late. When police came to ask Kimberly Sullivan about these horrific allegations, she gave shocking answers. Kimberly denied all allegations. She insisted the door wasn't locked and John was free to move around the house. She said John had mental health issues and he preferred to stay in his room alone. According to the arrest warrant, Sullivan stated the door wasn't locked and the victim had behavioral and mental issues. She also said the victim hadn't bathed because that was his own choice. But physical evidence told a completely different story. The door had a slide bolt mounted on the outside. John's condition, severe malnutrition, lack of medical care, lack of bathing, could not be a choice of someone who had freedom. After making initial denials, Sullivan refused to answer any more questions and said she wanted a lawyer. On March 12, 2025, Kimberly Sullivan was arrested at a location in Naugatuck, Connecticut. She faces multiple serious charges: kidnapping in the first degree, assault in the first degree, risk of injury to a minor or impaired person, reckless endangerment. The court set Sullivan's bond at $300,000. She was released after posting bail and must wear an electronic GPS monitoring device. She is prohibited from contacting the victim and restricted from leaving the state of Connecticut. Sullivan, 59, was scheduled to appear at Waterbury Superior Court on April 8, 2025, for a preliminary hearing. As of now, no official trial date has been set. Her attorney, Attorney Matthew C. Maddox, released a statement in March. Ms. Sullivan asserts her innocence. She looks forward to the opportunity to contest these allegations in court through due process. However, the Waterbury community and the entire United States are awaiting justice for John, a man who lost 20 years of his life. As with any shocking case, many rumors, unverified information, and unanswered questions have emerged around this stepmom case. Father Craig Sullivan, accomplice or also a victim? Many people question Craig Sullivan's role during the 20 years John was held captive. Craig lived in that very house. Did he know how his son was being treated? Some believe Craig may also have been a victim of Kimberly, controlled and afraid to speak up. Others believe he must have been complicit, or at least indifferent to his son's suffering. The truth is, we may never know for certain, because Craig Sullivan died in January 2024, before the case was discovered. And John didn't share much about his father in police interviews. One notable detail: Craig's brother said he tried to ask about John, but was cut off by Kimberly and later cut off from communication. This may suggest that Kimberly was controlling information and isolating Craig from family as well. Kimberly's daughters. Did they know anything? Kimberly Sullivan has daughters from a previous marriage. Some neighbors said they often saw the girls and their boyfriends at the Sullivan house. The question arises: did these girls know John was being held captive in the room? Did they ever see him? Did they ever hear him cry for help? Police haven't released information about whether Kimberly's daughters were questioned. But if they lived in that house, even if just visiting, it's very difficult for them to be completely unaware of John's existence. Some rumors on social media suggest the girls may have been manipulated by Kimberly into believing John was dangerous or crazy and needed to be kept in the room for safety. But this is only speculation. Did the neighbors really know nothing? For 20 years, not a single neighbor knew about John. Didn't they hear sounds from the room on the second floor? Didn't they ever wonder about the Sullivan family's son? Some question whether neighbors truly knew absolutely nothing, or chose to see nothing, know nothing, to avoid trouble. However, most neighbors insist they truly didn't know John existed. The Sullivan family lived reclusively, didn't communicate much with neighbors, and John's room was on the second floor, at the back of the house, so it was very difficult for anyone to hear sounds. McCullough, who lived across from the Sullivan house, said, "She was very secretive. She kept what was going on in her family to herself." Could there be other victims? A frightening question many ask. Did Kimberly Sullivan ever do something similar to anyone else? Before John, Were there other victims? So far, there's no evidence of other victims. But the fact that Kimberly could maintain such a brutal crime for 20 years makes people wonder if she has a history of abuse. Some sources say police are investigating Kimberly Sullivan's past, including previous marriages and any other children she may have cared for. Why didn't John try to escape earlier? This is a question many ask, often with a lack of understanding about the psychology of abuse victims. John explained that he was afraid. He was afraid that if he tried to escape and got caught again, the punishment would be even worse. He was afraid of being fed less, locked up longer, treated more brutally. And after 20 years of complete control, isolation from the outside world, John no longer had the will or strength to try to escape. He lived in a state of learned helplessness, a psychological phenomenon where victims no longer believe they can change their circumstances even when given opportunities. Only when his father died and the situation became so desperate it was unbearable did John make his final decision: set the room on fire to be free or die. After being rescued, John began a long and challenging recovery journey. Physically, he faces many serious issues due to prolonged malnutrition. Doctors had to carefully refeed him, step by step, to avoid refeeding syndrome. He needs comprehensive dental treatment because his teeth have rotted after years without care. Psychologically, John faces deep trauma. He lived in complete isolation for over 20 years, nearly his entire adult life. He doesn't know how to use modern technology. He doesn't know how to interact with others. The world of 2025 is completely foreign to him. John is currently living under a new identity, protected and supported by authorities and social welfare organizations. He's receiving psychological therapy to process trauma and learn how to live a normal life. In a public statement, John requested to be called by a new name he chose himself. This is an important step in his journey to autonomy. For the first time in his life, he has the right to decide about himself. He said, "I want a new name I choose. That's the first step for me to take back control of my life." Some sources say John is being supported by non-profit organizations specializing in helping abuse and captivity victims. He may be learning basic life skills like cooking, using a phone, social interaction, things most of us take for granted, but he was never taught. Community fundraising. After John's story was published, the community established fundraising campaigns to help him. A GoFundMe campaign was created with the goal of supporting medical costs, psychological therapy, and helping him start a new life. Thousands of people from across America have contributed, sending words of encouragement and prayers for John. Many say his story touched their hearts, and they want to do whatever they can to help him recover. John's future. Currently, John's future remains a big question mark. He will need many years of therapy to process psychological trauma. He will need to relearn how to live like a normal person, something he was deprived of for over 20 years. But one thing is certain: John is now free. He can go wherever he wants. He can eat when he's hungry. He can bathe when he wants. He can meet others, make friends, build his own life. And for the first time in his life, he has the right to decide his own future. The stepmom case shocked not only the Waterbury community, but the entire United States. Neighbors shocked and self-blaming. Many neighbors on Blake Street say they feel guilty for living near John for years without knowing he was suffering horrific pain. They wonder if they could have done more. McCullough, who lived across from the Sullivan house, said, "I feel bad for not knowing. If I had known, I would have done something. But how could I know? They were so secretive." Guarnera, the neighbor living next door, said, "This is a good neighborhood. We care about each other. But sometimes you don't know what's happening behind closed walls. That's the scariest thing." Online community outraged. On social media platforms like Reddit, TikTok, and Facebook, the case has attracted millions of views and comments. People express outrage at Kimberly Sullivan and demand the highest possible sentence. Many compare this case to other horrific captivity cases in history, like Joseph Fritzl in Austria, who locked his daughter in a basement for 24 years, Ariel Castro in Ohio, who kidnapped and held 3 women captive for 10 years, or the Turpin House in California, where 13 children were held captive and abused for years. What do experts say? Psychology and social work experts have spoken out analyzing the case. Dr. Emily Rothman, pseudonym, an expert in domestic abuse, said, "This is an extreme case of coercive control. Kimberly Sullivan created an environment where John was completely dependent on her and had no way to escape. This is psychological abuse combined with physical abuse at an extremely serious level." Law professor Michael Chen, pseudonym, from Yale University, said, "This case raises questions about system accountability. DCF investigated 6 times in 9 years, but couldn't protect John. We need to review how we monitor homeschooled children to ensure tragedies like this don't happen again." Calls for legal changes. After the case, many are calling for Connecticut and other states to have stricter laws on homeschooling. Currently, Connecticut has no mandatory regulations on registering or monitoring homeschooled students. Parents are only encouraged to register with the State Department of Education, but there's no penalty if they don't. Activists propose mandatory homeschool registration with authorities, annual periodic checks with homeschooled children, requiring periodic health checkups for children, creating mechanisms for teachers, neighbors, or the public to report when children disappear from the education system. However, this proposal also faces opposition from the legal homeschool community, who worry about excessive government interference in families' educational freedom. Sadly, John's case is not unique. History has witnessed many horrific cases of captivity and abuse within families. The Turpin House case, California, 2018. David and Louise Turpin held captive and abused their 13 children for years. The children were chained to beds, starved, beaten. When rescued, some were adults but weighed only as much as children due to severe malnutrition. The case was discovered when one of the 17-year-old daughters escaped and called 911. Like John, she had to find a desperate way to escape to be free. The Ariel Castro case, Ohio, 2013. Ariel Castro kidnapped and held 3 women, Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight, in his basement for about 10 years. The victims were chained, sexually abused, and completely isolated. They were rescued when Amanda Berry broke through the door and cried for help. Castro was later sentenced to life, but committed suicide in prison. The Joseph Fritzl case, Austria, 2008. Perhaps this is one of the most horrific captivity cases in history. Joseph Fritzl locked his daughter, Elizabeth, in a basement under his house for 24 years, from 1984 to 2008. He not only held her captive, but also sexually assaulted her repeatedly, causing her to give birth to 7 children in the basement. 3 children lived in the basement with their mother. 3 were brought up to live normally with Fritzl's wife, who knew nothing about the basement, and 1 died at birth. The case was discovered when one of the children in the basement needed emergency medical care, and Fritzl was forced to take them to the hospital, leading doctors to become suspicious and report to police. Common points of these cases. All these cases share some frightening commonalities. Victims were held captive in their own homes, places that should be the safest. Captivity lasted for years, even decades. Neighbors and the community knew nothing of what was happening. Victims ultimately had to find their own way to escape or cry for help, because no one discovered them. And the scariest thing? These crimes can happen anywhere, in any neighborhood, behind any wall, without anyone knowing. Legally, Kimberly Sullivan faces extremely serious charges. 1. Kidnapping in the first degree. This is the most serious charge. Under Connecticut law, kidnapping in the first degree is when a person holds another captive with intent to harm the victim, terrorize the victim or a third party, or hold captive under conditions that put the victim at risk of injury or death. This crime can be punished with 10 to 25 years in prison. Given John's circumstances, held captive for 20 years in horrific conditions, Kimberly could face the maximum sentence. 2. Assault in the first degree. This charge applies when a person causes serious injury to another. John's severe malnutrition, terrible health condition, and dental problems can all be considered serious injury. The penalty can be up to 20 years in prison. 3. Risk of injury to a minor or impaired person. This charge applies because John was held captive from when he was still a minor, 12 years old, and later in a physically and mentally impaired state. 4. Reckless endangerment. This is an additional charge related to putting another person in a dangerous situation. In total, Kimberly Sullivan could face decades in prison, even life if convicted on all charges. However, the case is still in the investigation and trial phase. Kimberly has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Her lawyer will try to defend her, possibly by completely denying the allegations, claiming John had mental problems and needed to be protected from himself, blaming the deceased husband, Craig Sullivan, trying to negotiate a reduced sentence. But with strong physical evidence, door locks, John's condition, victims' testimony, and public outrage, it's very difficult for Kimberly to escape conviction. The stepmom case leaves many painful lessons for society. 1. Homeschooling can be a tool to hide abuse. While most homeschooling families have good intentions, in some cases, this is a way for abusive parents to isolate children from the outside world. When a child is withdrawn from school, there are no more teachers, friends, or school staff who can recognize signs of abuse. The child completely disappears from society's eyes. 2. The child protection system needs improvement. DCF investigated 6 times, but still couldn't protect John. This shows the current system has serious loopholes. Better monitoring mechanisms are needed, especially for cases with previous abuse reports. When a child is withdrawn from school after multiple reports, that should be a major red flag. 3. Neighbors and communities need to be more vigilant. While it's difficult to interfere in others' private lives, if you notice, a child suddenly disappears from the neighborhood, a family living too reclusively, not letting anyone into the house, cries for help or unusual signs, a family member never seen, consider reporting to police or social welfare agencies. One call could save a life. 4. Abuse victims need to know they're not alone. If you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, remember, you don't have to suffer alone. There are people ready to help. Try to contact police, abuse hotlines, or trustworthy adults. Your safety is most important. Signs of recognizing abused children: coming to school hungry, dirty, or uncared for, begging food from friends or eating from trash, afraid when talking about home, frequently absent without clear reason. Unexplained bruises or wounds. Sudden behavioral changes. Withdrawal from friends and social activities. If you're a teacher, neighbor, friend, or anyone noticing these signs, take action. Don't think someone else will handle it. Sometimes you're the only chance for a child to be saved. The stepmom case is one of the most painful and shocking stories of 2025. It's evidence of the cruelty humans can inflict on each other, even within families, places that should be the safest. But amid that darkness, there's still light of hope. John survived. He found his way out. And now, he's learning to live a new life, the life he deserved all along. His journey ahead won't be easy. He'll carry physical and psychological scars for life. But he'll also have something he was deprived of for 20 years: freedom. Freedom to go where he wants. Freedom to eat when he's hungry. Freedom to meet others. Freedom to love and be loved. Freedom to dream and pursue dreams. And most importantly, freedom to be himself. Not John, the pseudonym media gave him, but the person he wants to become, with the name he chose himself. John's story reminds us that abuse can happen anywhere, even in the most seemingly normal places. Each of us has a responsibility to protect vulnerable people around us. It's never too late to escape, to seek help, to start over. Humans have an amazing ability to recover, even after the deepest traumas. As you watch this video, take a minute to think about people around you. Does anyone need help? Are there any signs that worry you? If so, take action. A call, a word of concern, a small action can make a big difference. To John and all victims of abuse and captivity around the world, we send our deepest sympathy and best wishes for the journey ahead. Your life is still there. Live it fully. You deserve happiness. If you enjoyed this video and would like to watch more mysterious topics, please subscribe to our channel. Goodbye, and see you again.